The hallway was silent except for her own heartbeat. Dammy hadn't meant to stop. She had just come out to use the restroom, completely unprepared for what she was about to hear. But something in the tone of his voice pinned her feet to the floor before her brain could tell them to move. Every time they find out what I am, they leave. She is not every woman, Jaewon. You don't know that. And you don't know that she is. You are punishing her for things she hasn't even done yet. Silence. Dammy's back was against the wall, hand over her mouth, heart completely off script. She had thought, at most, that he found her attractive. A passing thing. Something neither of them would ever name. She had not prepared for this. For him standing behind a door telling his mother he was afraid of her leaving before she even knew there was something to leave. Then came the words that rewired something inside her chest. Speak up, Jaewon. Madame Seo's voice. Firm and full of love. Don't let me do all the talking for you. Dammy stepped back. Quietly, carefully. Gave them 10 seconds. Then she walked back down that hallway making just enough noise to be heard, pushed the door open with a smile, and sat down like the ground beneath her hadn't just completely shifted. But it had. And nothing that came after was ever going to be the same. Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories. In today's episode, we bring you broken hearts, fated encounters, worlds colliding, unbreakable bonds, and dark romance. If you're just joining us for the first time, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss out on new story drops. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far these amazing stories have traveled. Now, let's dive back into this amazing story. 13 weeks before that hallway moment, Dammy Grayson was sitting on Yuna's bedroom floor crying. Yuna sat beside her, bowl of tteokbokki going cold between them, saying nothing because she knew Dammy well enough to know that words right now would feel like interference. So she just pressed her shoulder into Dammy's and stayed. 3 years, Dammy finally said. He said he outgrew it. Outgrew it. Like I was a phase he went through. Yuna chewed a rice cake slowly. He is a fool. Dammy laughed. One short broken sound. He really is. The worst kind, Yuna said. He made you feel like the problem when he was always the problem. Dammy dropped her head back against the mattress and stared at the ceiling. Outside, Seoul hummed in that early evening way. She had come to love this city more than she expected. This apartment, this floor, this specific patch of Yuna's life that had quietly become her softest place to land. Madame Seo appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of barley tea like a woman who had been waiting for exactly the right moment. Dammy. Soft. Deliberate. She crossed the room, lowered herself to the floor beside Dammy, and pressed a cup into both of Dammy's hands. Drink. Does it actually help? Dammy asked. No, Madame Seo said honestly. But it gives your hands something to hold. Dammy smiled. A real one. She wrapped both palms around the warmth and let it move through her. Madame Seo watched her face like a mother would, reading underneath the expression and catalogued pain. Then she patted Dammy's knee once, firmly, like a woman who had just made a quiet private decision, and stood up without another word. Yuna watched her mother leave, watched the set of her shoulders. That particular purposeful stillness that meant something had shifted in Madame Seo's internal world. Something had been decided. She looked at Dammy, then at the empty doorway, and thought, oh no, she must be up to something. 2 days later, Dammy was back. She kept coming back the way people return to places that hold them, not because anything was resolved, but because some spaces just carry you better than others. Yuna's apartment carried her. Madame Seo's cooking carried her. The sound of Korean drama dialogue from the living room television carried her in ways she couldn't explain and didn't try to. She was in the living room helping Madame Seo fold laundry, which had become a thing that just happened naturally between them, the way many things had become natural, when she heard the front door open. Not knock. Open. With a key. She looked up, and the room recalibrated. He was tall in the way that reorganizes your awareness of space. Suddenly, you know exactly where your own body is standing. Dark jacket. Jaw set with intention. Eyes that moved across the room with attention that clocks everything and gives nothing back. The kind of handsome that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives and rearranges things quietly. He said something to his mother in Korean, low, easy, And Madame Sio's face did that thing faces do for people they don't see enough of. Lit up from somewhere deep. Then his eyes moved to Dammy. She realized she was still holding a folded towel in both hands. "This is Dammy," Madame Sio said smoothly in English, like a woman delivering a line she had been holding. "Yuna's friend. She is practically family." A small, composed smile. "Dammy, this is my son, Jaewon." He looked at her for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. "Jaewon," he said low. A short nod. Then he disappeared down the hallway. Dammy stood very still. Then she set the towel down, walked directly to Yuna's room, closed the door behind her and said, "Yuna, why did you never tell me your brother looked like that?" Yuna was already grinning. "Like what? Do not play with me right now. I showed you pictures. From 10 years ago. He looked like a schoolboy." Dammy pressed both hands to her face. "I was not remotely prepared." Yuna laughed, loud and real, and Dammy pointed at her immediately. "This is not funny. My heart is literally still on the floor from the last situation. I cannot be noticing people. I refuse." "And yet," Yuna said. "And yet," Dammy admitted, dropping face first onto the bed. Yuna watched her with that grin still sitting on her face. And said nothing. Because some things you let unfold on their own timeline. The first time they were alone together it was completely Madame Sio's doing, and everyone in the apartment knew it, except possibly Jaewon. It started small. The way all the best traps do. Madame Sio appeared in the living room doorway one evening holding her purse and her shopping list and announced that she needed things from the market. Specific things. Things that required 2 people apparently because the bags would be heavy and her knees were not what they used to be. She looked at Jaewon. She looked at Dammy. She smiled the smile of a woman who has already won an argument that hasn't started yet. "You two go. Yuna will stay and keep me company." Yuna, from the couch, did not even look up from her phone. "Okay, Yama." Dammy looked at Yuna. Yuna did not look back. Deliberately. Jaewon said nothing. And held the door open. And that was how Dammy Grayson found herself walking through a Seoul evening market beside a man she was absolutely not ready to find completely, inconveniently interesting. He didn't talk much at first. That was the thing she had already noticed about him. He moved through the market with that same quiet authority he carried everywhere, checking items off the list his mother had written in Korean, navigating the crowded stalls with the ease of someone who had grown up in these streets. Dammy kept pace beside him and told herself she was not studying his profile. She was absolutely studying his profile. "You don't have to follow me around like I'm going to get lost," he said without looking at her. "I'm not following you. I'm walking beside you. There's a difference." He glanced at her sideways. Not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood of one. "You always talk this much? You always this quiet?" He looked at her fully then. Just for a moment. And something passed between them that neither of them acknowledged, a small electric recognition, the kind that happens before you have language for it. "Yes," he said simply, and turned back to the stall in front of him. Dammy looked away and pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. They fell into a rhythm without deciding to. He carried the heavy bags without being asked. She found the things on the list faster than he did, because she had been to this market with Madame Sio enough times to know exactly which vendor the older woman trusted for her gochujang and which one she tolerated only because he was closer. "She doesn't actually like that stall," Dammy said, steering them left at a junction. "She thinks his dried anchovies are inferior, but she's too polite to say so. Her actual person is around this corner." Jaewon stopped, looked at her. "You know my mother's anchovy preferences. I know your mother's anchovy opinions, her feelings about the neighbor's dog, her preferred drama streaming platform, and the exact temperature at which she thinks barley tea stops being medicinal." Dammy looked at him evenly. "We spend a lot of time together." Something shifted in his expression then. It was subtle. He looked at her like he was recalculating something. "She talks about you," he said quietly. "More than she probably realizes. Good things. Always." He said it simply, without decoration. They sat outside a Pojang Machu on the way back, his idea, which surprised her, and drank warm cans of sake while the evening cooled around them. The shopping bags sat at their feet. Neither of them was in a hurry to get back, and neither of them said that out loud. "How long have you been in Seoul?" he asked. 2 years. "You like it?" "More than I expected to." She turned the can in her hands. I came here to rebuild something. I didn't know if it would work. But soul, it doesn't ask you who you were before. It just lets you be whoever you're becoming. He was quiet for a moment. That's a generous reading of this city. Have you always lived here? She asked. Born here. I leave when I need to. I always come back. A pause. Some things you don't get to walk away from. She looked at him. There was something underneath that sentence. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? She asked. He considered it, then said, depends on the day. She nodded slowly, and they sat in the comfortable quiet of two people who have just discovered they can share silence without it becoming awkward, which is rarer than it sounds and means more than most people admit. On the walk back, his hand brushed hers, reaching for one of the bags. Neither of them moved away immediately. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. The back of his hand against the back of hers. Warm. Still. The city moving loudly all around them while that small patch of contact existed in its own private quiet. Then he picked up the bag, and they kept walking. Neither of them said anything. But Dammy's heart was doing something completely against her instructions, and she absolutely knew, that she was in some kind of trouble. That night, lying on Yuna's bed while Yuna did her skincare routine at the mirror, Dammy stared at the ceiling and said, he's going through a breakup too, isn't he? It wasn't really a question. She had felt it in the market, that particular quality of guardedness that only comes from recent pain. She recognized it because she was wearing the same garment. Yuna paused with the toner pad halfway to her face. He told you. He didn't have to. Dammy turned to look at her. What happened? Yuna set the pad down, sat on the edge of the bed, chose her carefully. She couldn't handle his life. What he does. She found out, and she left. It wasn't the first time that's happened. What does he do? Dammy asked. Yuna looked at her. A look that lasted just a beat too long. Just enough to register as something other than nothing. He runs the family business, she said carefully. It's complicated. He doesn't really talk about it. Dammy held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded and looked back at the ceiling. And the open loop that had been quietly humming since the moment J1 walked through that door grew, just a little louder. It became a pattern. Whenever J1 visited, which was becoming more frequent in ways that Madame Co definitely had everything to do with, he and Dammy ended up in the same space. Same kitchen. Same market run. Same evening sitting on the building steps with something warm to drink while Soul did what Soul does at night. Dammy noticed that he always knew when her cup was empty. J1 noticed that she laughed with her whole body, not performed, not contained. Just completely and genuinely present in the moment of it, and it did something to the carefully managed quiet he kept around himself that he didn't have language for yet. Madame Co noticed everything and said nothing, and smiled into her tea. It was a Tuesday when it shifted. Dammy was in the kitchen helping prepare dinner. She had graduated from guest to active participant in Madame Co's, and J1 came in looking for water. He filled the glass. He leaned against the counter. He watched her work for a moment. You cook? He asked. My mother would disown me if I didn't. She didn't look up from the vegetables she was cutting. Nigerian household. You learn or you suffer the consequences. What consequences? Hunger, mostly. And the disappointment of a Nigerian mother, which is honestly worse than hunger. Or the daily reminder of not finding a husband if you were lacking in the kitchen. He made a sound low, quiet. Your mother? You're close? She's my person. She's loud and opinionated, and she will tell you exactly what she thinks of you within 45 seconds of meeting you. But she shows up. Always. Whatever it costs her, she shows up. She felt him go quiet in a different way then. Mine too, he said, softly. Dammy looked up from the cutting board. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Open. Unguarded. Just for a moment. Then Madame Co's voice came from the living room asking about the green onions. The coffee shop was Madame Co's idea, obviously. She had remembered, conveniently, that she needed a specific type of traditional tea only available at a shop 20 minutes away. She had also remembered, equally conveniently, that her knees were bothering her today. She looked at J1. She looked at Dammy. She handed J1 a folded piece of paper with the name of the shop and went back to her drama without another word. Yuna, from behind her laptop, didn't even blink. The coffee shop they stopped at on the way back was Dammy's suggestion, and J1 agreed without hesitation, which she noted privately. They sat across from each other at a small window table. Rain had started outside, the soft, persistent soul kind that doesn't commit to being dramatic but simply covers everything in gray. Dammy wrapped both hands around her Americano. J1 drank his black, no ceremony. "Can I ask you something?" Dammy said. He looked at her steadily. "You're going to regardless." "Fair." She smiled. "The women before. The ones who left." She watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "You don't seem broken by it. You seem like you expected it." A long pause. He turned his cup on the table once. Slow rotation. "When something happens enough times," he said carefully, "you stop being surprised by it. You just factor it in. Build around it. Even worse, expect it." "That sounds lonely." "It is what it is."
"No."
She said it gently, but without apology. That's what people say when something hurts too much to call it what it actually is. He looked at her. "You do that a lot," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Say the thing. The actual thing. Most people talk around it." "I grew up in a house where talking around things was considered a waste of everyone's time." She held his gaze. "You build walls because you've been left. I understand that. I just built mine out of pretending I was fine when I wasn't. Different material, same structure." The rain moved quietly against the glass, and something in the air at that small table tightened, charged and warm and completely unspoken. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He looked down at it. Something moved across his face. Fast, controlled, professional. He was somewhere else for 3 seconds, and when he looked back up he was J1 again. "We should get back," he said quietly. Dammy nodded, picked up her cup, finished it. But she had seen the name on that message before the screen went dark. Not a name. A title. 2 words in Korean that she didn't fully understand but had heard before, somewhere, in a context she couldn't immediately place. She filed it away, said nothing, smiled at him when they stood to leave. They came back to the apartment to find it quiet. Yuna had stepped out. Madame Seo was in her room. Dammy could hear the low murmur of her evening drama through the closed door. The apartment held that particular early evening stillness that settles over spaces when the people in them have temporarily scattered. Dammy excused herself to use the restroom. She padded down the hallway in her socks, hair still slightly damp from the light rain outside, mind still turning over that message on his phone. That title, that word, the context she couldn't quite locate yet. She was on her way back, hand raised to push open the living room door, when she heard it. Voices inside. Jiwon's. And his mother's. She hadn't heard Madame Seo come out of her room. But there she was, and there he was, and the conversation on the other side of that door was not the kind that announced itself. "You're doing it again," Madame Seo said. Quiet.
Certain.
The voice of a woman who has watched this particular pattern long enough to name it in her sleep. "Iyama. Don't Iyama me. I have eyes, J1. I watch you with her. I watch you pull back every single time you get close enough for it to mean something. Like clockwork. It's not the right time." He exclaims. "It is never the right time with you. That is the problem. You don't understand what I'm asking her to walk into." "I understand perfectly." Madame Seo's voice dropped lower, more deliberate. "I also understand that she is not a child. She is a grown woman who has already been through enough to know what real feels like when it is standing in front of her. And what is standing in front of her is real. What you feel is real. And you are letting the shadow of every woman who left make the decision for a woman who hasn't gone anywhere." Dammy's back found the wall. Her hand dropped to her side. She was not breathing. "Every single time, Iyama. The moment they find out, they leave. You know this. I know this. It has never once gone differently. Dammy is not every one of them. You don't know that."
"No."
Madame Seo, steady as stone. "But you don't know that she is. And you are punishing her for things she hasn't even done yet. You are punishing yourself. And I am tired of watching it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Dammy had ever stood inside. Because she had thought, at most, that it was attraction. A passing thing. Something physical that would dissolve on its own once she went back to her real life. She had been so careful, so deliberate about keeping it filed under Do Not Touch. She had not prepared for this. For him standing on the other side of a door telling his mother he was afraid of her, specifically her, leaving. "She deserves to make her own choice," Madame Seo said softly. But she cannot make it if you never give her the truth. And you cannot give her the truth if you never open your mouth. A pause. Waited. Full. Speak up, J1. If you feel something, speak up. Don't let me do all the talking for you. Don't let fear do all the talking for you. That is not who I raised you to be. A long exhale. His. Dammy stood in that hallway and felt something move through her chest that had no clean name. Not joy, not fear, not the giddy, uncomplicated flutter of early attraction. Something older than all of that. Something that understood wait. She gave it 10 full seconds. Then she took one careful step back. Then another. Turned. Walked back down the hallway, deliberately, normally, her socks making soft sounds against the floor. Cleared her throat lightly. Came back with her footsteps landing a little heavier. Pushed the door open with the easy, casual energy of a woman who had heard absolutely nothing. Sorry, I forgot where I left my purse. A light laugh. Eyes moving between them with perfect innocence. Am I interrupting something? Madame Co looked at her with warm, composed eyes. Not at all, Damia. Come in. Sit. J1 looked at her, and for just a moment, one unguarded fraction of a second, something in his expression was open. I'll get tea, he said quietly, and moved past her to the kitchen. Dammy sat down, smiled at Madame Co, picked up the book from the side table that she had no intention of reading, and felt the full impossible weight of knowing something about a man that he didn't know she knew, that underneath everything he carried, underneath every wall and every managed silence and every woman he had already watched walk away, he was standing in his mother's living room being afraid of losing her. Her. Dammy Grayson, who had come to Seoul to rebuild herself, who had arrived at this apartment broken open by someone else's carelessness, who had not been looking for anything, who was now, completely, inconveniently, and perhaps irreversibly, in the middle of something she had absolutely no roadmap for. And the warmth of it and the weight of it sat in her chest at exactly the same time. Now, before we get to what happens next, if this story has been pulling you in, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who needs a good love story in their life today. And I need you to drop your thoughts in the comments because this story has me asking too many questions alone. First, when Dammy overheard that conversation in the hallway and felt something shift inside her chest, what should she have done with that? Should she have gone straight to Yuna and pressed her for answers? Or was the fact that she couldn't stop thinking about it already telling her everything she needed to know, that her curiosity had already crossed a line and her feelings were growing whether she was ready for them or not? And second, that moment in the coffee shop when the phone buzzed and J1 shut down completely in a split second. Something was clearly off. Should Dammy have trusted that instinct, locked in, and started pulling back slowly before she got in any deeper? Or was her decision to stay present, say nothing, and keep showing up actually the right one? Drop your answers below and tell me which city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far these stories have traveled. Then stay right here because what happens next changes everything. And trust me, you are not ready for what J1 does next. It happened on an ordinary Seoul Thursday with gray skies and street food smell. Dammy was alone in the living room. Madame Co had gone to visit a neighbor. Yuna had a work call that had been going for 40 minutes longer than expected. J1 was somewhere in the apartment. She could feel his presence the way you feel weather changing before it actually changes. That particular shift in atmospheric pressure that your body registers before your mind catches up. She was reading, or trying to read, the same paragraph 4 times. He came in and sat in the armchair across from her without ceremony. No announcement, just settled into the space. Like he belonged there. She looked up. He was already looking at her. You're not reading, he said. I'm reading. You've been on the same page for 20 minutes. She closed the book. Were you watching me? Something moved at the corner of his mouth. You're hard not to watch. The room went very quiet. Dammy felt heat move up the back of her neck and made an executive decision to hold eye contact anyway because she was not the kind of woman who looked away from things just because they made her feel something. J1. I know, he said quietly, like she had already finished the sentence, like he had been waiting for it. I know what this is becoming. She held very still, and he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands loosely linked, looking at her with that expression she had come to recognize as him being more honest than he was comfortable with. And I don't know what to do with it. That's the truth. Because of the women before. Because of what I am. He said it carefully, deliberately. What my life is. What it asks of the people around me. You keep saying that. She tilted her head slightly. What you are. What your life is. But you never actually say what that means. A pause. Just a fraction too long. It's complicated, he said. You sound like Yuna. Something flickered behind his eyes. Dammy. Her name in his mouth was different. I have spent a long time making peace with the fact that what I carry, people can't always hold it with me. That's not self-pity. It's just true. And I would rather, he stopped. Started again. I would rather say nothing than say something and watch you leave. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who carried everything internally, who spoke in careful, measured sentences, who served her food before himself and noticed when her cup was empty and had told his mother in a hallway he didn't know she could hear that he was afraid. I'm not her, Dammy said quietly. I'm not any of them. And I need you to stop making decisions about what I can handle before you've given me the actual information to handle. He looked at her. Steady. Searching. You deserve to know what you'd be walking into, he said. Then tell me. Are you trans? Just tell me already. The longest pause yet. And then, slowly, like a man stepping off something high, he reached across the space between them and took her hand. Just held it. Palm against palm. Warm and still and completely deliberate. Not yet, he said softly. But soon. I promise you, soon. His hand was warm and his eyes were honest, and she was 28 years old and already tired of building walls out of old pain. So she turned her hand over in his and held back. That evening, Madame Co came home to find them sitting on the building steps outside, sharing a bag of hotdog from the street vendor at the corner, shoulders touching, talking in the easy, unhurried way of people who have stopped performing for each other. She stood in the doorway for exactly 3 seconds. Then she went inside, found Yuna in her room, and said with profound maternal satisfaction, I told you. Yuna looked up from her laptop. Yama, you literally engineered this entire situation. I created conditions, Madame Co said with great dignity. They made the choices. The call came late. Dammy was in the bathroom washing her face when she heard it, Jaewon's voice from the living room, dropping register the way it did when something required his full professional attention. Lower. Clipped. A different language entirely from the one he used with her. She turned off the tap. She wasn't trying to listen. She told herself she wasn't trying to listen. But the apartment was quiet, and his voice carried, and she heard 3 things distinctly through the thin wall between them. A name she didn't recognize. A number that sounded large. And then in Korean, but slowly enough, carefully enough, that her time and soul gave her just enough to catch it. A word. A title. One she had heard before, in a context she had been trying to place for weeks. She stood at the bathroom sink with water still dripping from her hands. And suddenly the context arrived. It came back to her, all at once, fully formed, completely certain. A conversation. 3 months ago. A colleague at work describing a story she'd read, using that exact word, that exact title, describing what it meant, who it belonged to, what kind of man carried it. Dammy looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her own face looked back at her. Brown skin, wide eyes, water still on her jaw. The warm feeling in her chest from an hour ago, his hand in hers, his shoulder against hers on the steps, the easy quiet of 2 people who had stopped pretending, was still there. But underneath it now, something cold. She heard him finish the call, heard the apartment go quiet again, heard his footsteps move toward the kitchen. She stood at the mirror for another 30 seconds. Then she dried her hands very carefully, folded the towel, set it down, and walked back out into the living room with a smile on her face that cost her more than she had budgeted for. He looked up from the kitchen counter when she appeared, and he smiled back, slow, warm, real, the rare full version. You okay? He asked. Perfect, she said. And she sat back down on the couch and picked up her book and found the page she had been on, and did not read a single word, because Seo Jaewon, the man whose hand she had been holding an hour ago, the man whose mother had adopted her like a daughter, the man who was afraid she would leave when she found out what he was, had just shown her exactly what he was. And now she had a decision to make. She didn't sleep. Not really. She lay on Yuna's spare mattress in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to Soul doing what Soul does at night, breathing, humming, existing without apology. And she thought about everything and nothing in a loop that had no clean exit. His hand in hers on the steps, that word through the bathroom wall. His smile when she walked back into the room. Slow, warm, unguarded in a way she now understood cost him something to give. The women before her, every single one of them, gone the moment they found out. She understood now why. She understood now what they had seen that made them leave. What J1 carried. What his life actually was underneath the quiet authority and the controlled jaw, and the way he always knew when her cup was empty. She understood what he meant every time he said it's complicated, and what I am, and what my life asks of the people around me. He had been telling her, in every careful sentence, every measured pause. She just hadn't had the vocabulary for it yet. Now she did. And the question that was keeping her awake, the one that had replaced every other thought in her head, was not what he was. It was what she was going to do about it. She was still awake when the sky outside Yuna's window began its slow shift from black to the particular deep blue that comes just before dawn commits to itself. Yuna stirred in her bed, rolled over, looked at Dammy in the low light with the immediate knowing of someone who has been friends long enough to read a body in the dark. "You're not sleeping," Yuna said. "I'm resting, Dammy." A long pause. "Yuna." Dammy kept her eyes on the ceiling, kept her voice very even, very careful. "The family business." She felt Yuna go still across the room. "Tell me what it actually is. Dammy. Don't manage me right now. I'm not asking you to tell me everything. I'm asking you to tell me if what I think I know is true." Another silence. Longer. Then the sound of Yuna sitting up in her bed. "How much do you know?" Yuna asked quietly. "Enough." The word landed between them and stayed there. Yuna exhaled slowly. "I wanted to tell you. I didn't know how. I didn't know if it would even. I didn't know where this was going between you two, and I thought. You thought you'd wait. I thought it wasn't my thing to tell." Dammy was quiet for a moment, processing, separating the threads carefully, her feelings about J1, her feelings about Yuna, her feelings about herself, and the decision she was sitting inside right now. "Are you angry with me?" Yuna asked. Small. Genuine. "I don't know yet. Honest. I'm not angry. I need to think." Dammy, he's still him. Everything you've seen, that's real. He doesn't show people that. What he's shown you, I've watched my brother for 26 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever the rest of it is, that part is real. Dammy closed her eyes, because she knew that. That was precisely the problem. If it had been simple, if he had been alive from the beginning, if the warmth had been performance, if his mother's love had been strategy, it would have been easy. She would have known exactly what to do. But it wasn't simple. He wasn't a lie. The warmth was real, and the fear was real, and the hand holding hers on those steps had been the realest thing she had felt in longer than she wanted to admit. And that made the decision sitting in front of her the hardest kind. Morning arrived, indifferent, bright, slightly offensive in its cheerfulness. Dammy heard Madame Co in the kitchen before she heard anything else. Water running, the soft knock of a pot being set down, the smell of doenjang beginning its slow work. She got up, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror again. Same face as last night, same eyes, same woman. But something behind the eyes was different, quieter, more settled. She walked to the kitchen doorway. Madame Co was at the stove with her back to the door. She didn't turn around, but she said, "Sit, Dammy. Breakfast is almost ready." Dammy sat at the kitchen table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just the soft sounds of the kitchen doing what kitchens do in the morning. And then Madame Co set a bowl of juk down in front of Dammy and sat across from her and looked at her with those eyes that read everything underneath the surface and said nothing and waited. "You knew I'd find out," Dammy said quietly. Madame Co folded her hands on the table. "I knew you were smart enough to. And you still." Dammy gestured slightly. "All of it. The market runs. The coffee shops. The deliberately engineered proximity. You still did all of this." "Yes." "Why?" Madame Co looked at her for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured and warm and completely certain. Because I have watched my son spend years being loved by women who loved the idea of him until they saw the whole truth of him. And I have watched him make peace with that, build his life around that expectation, until he stopped trying before anything could begin. She paused. And then you came into this house. And I watched him try again. For the first time in a very long time, he tried. She held Dammy's gaze. I did not engineer your feelings, Dammy. I only made sure you were in the same room long enough to find them. Dammy looked down at the bowl in front of her.
Steam rising.
Warm and steady. I don't know what to do, she admitted. The first time she had said it out loud. It felt different outside her head. More real. More manageable somehow. I know, Madam CO said simply. That is yours to figure out. I won't do that part for you. A small smile. Knowing. I won't do all the talking. Dammy looked up at her. And for the first time since the bathroom mirror the night before, she felt something loosen in her chest. Not resolution. Not an answer. Just relief. She was putting on her jacket to leave when she heard him behind her. She turned. J1 was standing in the hallway.
Dressed. Jacket on.
Like he had been about to leave too. They looked at each other across the short distance of that hallway. The same hallway where she had stood 2 weeks ago with her back against the wall and her hand over her mouth learning that he was afraid. Now she was the one who knew something he didn't know she knew. He studied her face with those careful eyes that missed nothing. And she watched something move across his expression, a question he wasn't sure how to ask. A recognition that something had shifted overnight in the atmosphere between them. You okay? He asked. The same question as last night. This time she didn't answer immediately. She looked at him, really looked at him, at everything she knew now, and everything she still didn't. At the man and the shadow the man cast. At the warmth that was real and the complication that was equally real. Ask me again in a few days, she said quietly. He held her gaze, and she watched him understand, not the specifics, not the details, but the shape of it. That she knew something, that something had changed, that the next move was not his to make right now. He nodded slowly.
Once.
And she walked past him to the front door and let herself out into the soul morning. And J1 stood in the hallway of his mother's apartment and watched her go. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't make peace with it. He didn't factor it in and build around it. He stood there, and he felt it, fully, completely, without the usual management, and he made a quiet private decision of his own. Some loves find you when you are ready for them. Perfectly timed. Clean-handed. Heart open and waiting. And some loves find you in the middle of your healing, when your guard is down and your hands are full, and you are not remotely prepared for what is walking through the door. Those are the ones that ask the most of you. The ones that make you choose between safety and truth, between what you know and what you feel, between the person you were before the heartbreak and the person you are quietly becoming. Dammy Grayson walked out into that soul morning not knowing what she was going to do. But she was still walking towards something. And sometimes, that is enough to begin. So, here is what I need you to tell me in the comments right now. If you were Dammy, standing in that hallway, looking at a man you are falling for, knowing what you now know about who he really is, would you stay or would you walk away? And be honest, because it is easy to say you would leave. But what if everything real you have felt in the last few weeks has been with him? And second, do you think J1 should have told Dammy the truth himself before she found out on her own? Did his silence protect her, or did it betray her before anything even began? Drop your answers below. Tell me which city you are watching from. And if this story moved you at all, share it with someone today, because these are the stories that deserve to travel. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. Because part 2 of this story is coming, and I promise you, what Dammy decides next will surprise you. Don't miss it.